I learned something important that night. Sometimes the difference between life and death is not courage. Sometimes it is simply noticing what everyone else misses. My name is Olivia Carter, and at the time, I was just a waitress working the evening shift at one of the most exclusive restaurants in Chicago. The kind of place where politicians, celebrities, and powerful businessmen disappeared behind private dining rooms and expected the rest of the world to stay outside. For me, it was another Friday night. Busy, loud, predictable. At least that is what I thought. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a luxury hotel overlooking the city skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed thousands of lights stretching across the darkness. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished marble floors. Every table looked perfect. Every detail mattered. I had worked there for 3 years, long enough to recognize wealthy customers, long enough to understand that some people carried a different kind of power. Around 7:30 that evening, the atmosphere changed. It always happened the same way. Conversations became quieter. Staff members straightened their posture. Managers suddenly appeared from nowhere. That was when I knew someone important had arrived. I glanced toward the entrance and immediately understood why. Nicholas Russo walked into the restaurant surrounded by several associates. Even if someone had never heard his name, they would have noticed him. He carried himself differently. Calm, controlled, confident. He wore a tailored black suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His expression remained unreadable as he crossed the room. The hostess escorted him toward a private corner table overlooking the city. I watched for only a second before returning to work. Famous customers came and went every week. They usually wanted privacy, and I preferred keeping my distance. About 20 minutes later, I was assigned to serve drinks to Nicholas's table. Nothing unusual, just another order. I carried the tray across the dining room and approached with my professional smile. The men at the table were discussing business. Nicholas sat facing the windows. Up close, he seemed even more intimidating. Not because he looked angry, because he looked like a man who noticed everything. I placed the drinks carefully and began stepping away. Then something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was a reflection from the chandelier, a small metallic object partially hidden beneath the table. I paused. The object looked completely out of place. My heart began beating faster. Working in restaurants teaches you to notice details. Spilled water, broken glass, forgotten bags. This felt different. Wrong. I bent slightly as if adjusting a chair. The object remained there. Small, unfamiliar, attached beneath the table where nobody would normally look. Every instinct inside me screamed that something was not right. I stood up quickly. For a moment, I considered walking away. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was nothing. But the uneasy feeling refused to disappear. Nicholas glanced toward me, noticing my hesitation. "Is there a problem?" he asked calmly. The men at the table stopped talking. Suddenly, every eye focused on me. My pulse raced. I knew I should remain professional. Instead, the words escaped before I could stop them. "Sir," I said quietly, leaning closer. "You need to look under your table." The entire room seemed to freeze. Nicholas studied my face for several long seconds. Then, without saying a word, he slowly pushed back his chair and looked beneath the table. The moment his expression changed, I realized my life was about to change too. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows while silence settled over the table like a heavy curtain. Nicholas remained crouched slightly beside his chair, his eyes fixed on whatever he had discovered beneath the table. The calm confidence that had surrounded him since he entered the restaurant vanished for the first time. One of the men seated beside him immediately stood. Another stepped closer. Their expressions hardened. I could not see the object clearly from where I stood, but I knew one thing. It was not supposed to be there. Nicholas slowly straightened and looked directly at me. His face revealed nothing, yet something in his eyes had changed. He was no longer looking at a waitress. He was looking at the person who had noticed what everyone else missed. "Thank you," he said quietly. The word surprised me. Then he turned toward the men at his table. "We are leaving." No panic. No raised voices. Just a simple instruction. Yet every person around him reacted immediately. Within seconds, the group was moving toward a private exit near the back of the restaurant. Several men appeared from seemingly nowhere. Security, I assumed. The entire operation happened so smoothly that many guests never realized anything unusual had occurred. I stood frozen beside the table holding an empty serving tray. My manager hurried toward me. "Olivia, what happened?" I shook my head. "I am not sure." That was the truth. I was not sure. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Rumors spread among the staff almost immediately. Some claimed I had discovered a tracking device. Others insisted it was a hidden recording system. A few employees believed it was nothing at all, and that wealthy people simply enjoyed creating drama. I ignored the speculation. What bothered me was Nicholas's reaction. Powerful men were not easily surprised. Yet for a brief moment, he had looked genuinely concerned. Around midnight, I finally finished work and stepped outside the hotel. Cool autumn air greeted me. Traffic moved through the city below. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking toward the train station. That was when I noticed the black SUV parked across the street. At first, I thought nothing of it. Luxury vehicles were common downtown. Then the driver's side door opened. A man wearing a dark suit stepped out and approached. My pulse immediately quickened. "Miss Carter," he asked politely. "Yes." He nodded. "Mr. Russo would like a word." I stared at him. Surely this had to be a mistake. Right now? Yes. Every sensible thought in my head told me to decline. Unfortunately, curiosity has always been stronger than common sense. A few minutes later, I found myself seated inside the back of the SUV. The interior smelled faintly of leather. City lights flashed across the windows. Nicholas sat across from me. Even in silence, he commanded attention. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he finally broke the silence. "How did you know?" I blinked. "Know what?" That something was wrong under the table. The question sounded simple, yet his expression suggested the answer mattered greatly. I thought back to the metallic object hidden beneath the table. "I did not know," I admitted. "I just noticed something that did not belong there." Nicholas studied me carefully. My security team inspected that room before we arrived. I remained silent. They missed it. His gaze never left mine. "You did not." The realization seemed to trouble him more than the device itself. As the SUV continued through the city, I suddenly understood something. Nicholas Russo had survived whatever danger waited beneath that table. But now he was obsessed with a different mystery. Me. The next morning, I woke up convinced the entire conversation had been some strange dream. People like Nicholas Russo did not invite waitresses into luxury SUVs to discuss restaurant tables. People like me returned to work, paid bills, and worried about rent. Our worlds were not supposed to overlap. Yet as I stood in my small apartment making coffee, I could not stop replaying the conversation. The way he studied every answer. The way he seemed less interested in the object under the table than in the fact that I had noticed it at all. By the time my evening shift began, I had almost convinced myself to forget about it. Almost. The restaurant looked exactly the same. The same chandeliers. The same polished floors. The same city skyline glowing beyond the windows. But I noticed something different immediately. Two men in dark suits occupied a table near the entrance. They were not eating. They were watching. Not the guests. Me. Every time I crossed the dining room, I could feel their eyes following my movements. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Maybe they worked for Nicholas. Maybe they were security. Either way, it was unsettling. Around 8 o'clock, my manager approached carrying a sealed envelope. "This was left for you." I frowned. "For me?" He nodded. "A courier delivered it an hour ago." Once he walked away, I carefully opened it. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Thank you. Stay alert." No signature. No explanation. Yet I immediately knew who had sent it. The handwriting looked precise and controlled, just like the man himself. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. For the rest of the evening, I tried focusing on work. Unfortunately, life had other plans. Near the end of my shift, an elderly customer accidentally dropped several shopping bags near the entrance. Before anyone else reacted, I hurried over to help. Groceries rolled across the floor. A carton of eggs nearly fell apart. The woman looked embarrassed. "I am so sorry," she said. "Do not worry about it," I replied with a smile. Together we gathered everything. It took less than 2 minutes. A small act. Nothing special. Or so I thought. As the woman left, I glanced toward the entrance. One of the suited men was watching. Not suspiciously. Curiously. As if he had just learned something important. The feeling followed me all night. 3 days passed. Then 4. The men continued appearing. Sometimes outside the restaurant. Sometimes across the street from my apartment building. Never approaching. Never speaking. Just watching. By the 5th day, I finally lost patience. As I left work that evening, I crossed the street directly toward one of them. He seemed surprised by my approach. "Why are you following me?" I demanded. The man hesitated. "We are not following you." "Really?" I crossed my arms. "Then this is a remarkable coincidence." A faint smile appeared. "Mr. Russo asked us to keep an eye on you." My frustration immediately shifted to confusion. "Why?" The man looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Because someone else has been watching you too." The city noise seemed to fade around me. "What does that mean?" He glanced toward the busy street before answering. "The object under that table was not placed there by accident." A chill ran down my spine. For the first time since that night, I realized something terrifying. Whatever had happened inside the restaurant had not ended. It had only begun. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my apartment seemed louder than usual. Every passing car made me glance toward the window. I kept replaying the man's words in my head. Someone else had been watching me. Until then, the entire situation had felt distant, almost unreal. Strange, yes. Unsettling, certainly, but still separate from my actual life. Now it felt personal. The following afternoon, I finished my shift and stepped out of the restaurant into a cold Chicago wind. The city moved around me as it always had. People rushed along sidewalks. Taxis filled the streets. Office workers hurried toward train stations. Yet I could not shake the feeling that something had changed. Halfway to the subway entrance, my phone rang. An unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Instead, I answered. "Hello." Silence greeted me. Then a voice I immediately recognized. "Where are you?" "Nicholas Russo." My heart skipped. "Walking home." A brief pause followed. "Do not take the train today." I stopped moving. "Why?" "Because I am asking you not to." The calm certainty in his voice made my stomach tighten. "Nicholas, what is happening?" More silence. Then a sigh. "You are involved now." "Involved in what?" "Something that should have ended at the restaurant." Before I could ask another question, he added, "Stay where you are." The line disconnected. I stared at my phone in disbelief. 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled to the curb beside me. I should have been frightened. Instead, I felt oddly relieved. A suited driver stepped out and opened the rear door. This time I climbed inside without arguing. Nicholas sat across from me. His expression looked more serious than I had ever seen. "You are going to tell me what is happening," I said immediately. "I deserve that much." For a moment, he simply watched me. Then he nodded. "You do." The vehicle pulled away from the curb. Chicago drifted past the tinted windows. Nicholas leaned back slightly. The object beneath the table was not random. I figured that much. Whoever placed it knew exactly where I would be sitting. I swallowed. "So they were targeting you." His eyes shifted toward the window. "That was our first assumption." The wording caught my attention immediately. "First assumption?" Nicholas folded his hands. "After reviewing security footage and interviewing staff, we discovered something unusual. A knot formed in my stomach." "What?" His gaze returned to mine. The placement of the object made no sense. I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It was visible." He spoke carefully. "Not obvious, but visible. Someone observant could find it." Confusion spread through me. "Then why hide it at all?" "Exactly." The answer hung between us. Suddenly I understood. "You think someone wanted it to be found." Nicholas nodded slowly. "And you were the person who found it." A chill ran through me. The city outside suddenly felt very far away. Why would anyone want that? For the first time since entering the vehicle, uncertainty appeared in Nicholas's eyes. "That is the question we have been trying to answer." The SUV turned through large iron gates and entered a sprawling private estate on the edge of the city. Beautiful stone buildings rose beyond carefully maintained gardens. Security personnel stood discreetly throughout the grounds. I stared through the window. "Where are we?" Nicholas followed my gaze. "Somewhere safe." As the vehicle rolled toward the mansion, a realization settled over me. I thought I had accidentally noticed something beneath the table. Instead, I had stepped into a mystery that seemed to have been waiting for me long before I ever walked into that restaurant. The estate felt less like a mansion and more like a small private world hidden from the rest of Chicago. As the SUV disappeared beneath a covered entrance, I stepped out and stared at the enormous stone building rising before me. Warm lights glowed behind tall windows. Perfectly trimmed gardens stretched across the property. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Nicholas noticed my expression. Most people expect something more dramatic. I glanced at him. Should I? A faint smile touched his face. Probably. It vanished almost immediately. A woman in her 60s greeted us inside the foyer. Her silver hair was neatly arranged, and her posture radiated confidence. "Mr. Russo," she said warmly before turning toward me. "And you must be Olivia." The fact that she already knew my name unsettled me more than it should have. "This is Martha," Nicholas explained. "She manages the house." Martha smiled kindly. "You are safe here." The words sounded reassuring. Yet they also confirmed something I was still struggling to accept. Safe from whom? The next hour passed in a blur. Martha showed me a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. Fresh flowers stood beside the windows. A tray of food waited on a nearby table. Everyone treated me like an honored guest. Nobody explained why. Eventually, after changing clothes and attempting to calm my racing thoughts, I found myself wandering onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. Evening sunlight painted the grounds in gold. For the first time all day, everything felt quiet. Most people would be terrified. Nicholas's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him standing near the doorway. "Maybe I am." He studied me for a moment. "You hide it well." I laughed softly. "I work in customer service. It is practically a job requirement." To my surprise, he actually smiled. Not the polite smile he showed strangers. A real one. Brief, but genuine. We stood in silence watching the sunset. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me since the SUV ride. "Why me?" Nicholas looked toward the horizon. "I am trying to answer that myself." "You think someone wanted me to find that object?" "Yes. But I had never even met you." His jaw tightened slightly. "That is what makes this dangerous." The word dangerous sent a chill through me. Before I could respond, one of Nicholas's security men approached from across the terrace. His expression looked unusually serious. He handed Nicholas a tablet computer. Nicholas reviewed something on the screen. The color drained slightly from his face. "What is it?" I asked. For several seconds, he remained silent. Then he turned the screen toward me. A photograph filled the display. My breath caught instantly. It was me, leaving work 2 weeks earlier. Another image followed. Me entering a grocery store. Another. Me walking my mother to her doctor's appointment. The dates stretched back months. Long before the restaurant. Long before I ever saw the object beneath the table. My hands began trembling. "Who took these?" Nicholas's voice remained calm, but I could hear the anger beneath it. "That is exactly what we are going to find out." I stared at the photographs in disbelief. The mystery I thought had started that night in the restaurant suddenly looked much older, much bigger. And as the last sunlight disappeared beyond the estate, a terrifying realization settled into my mind. Someone had been watching me long before I ever noticed them. The photographs changed everything. Until that moment, I believed I had accidentally wandered into someone else's problem. Now I knew the truth. Whoever had arranged the events at the restaurant already knew who I was. They knew where I worked. They knew where I lived. They even knew about my mother. That realization followed me through the mansion like a shadow. The next morning, I sat alone in the estate's library staring out at the gardens. Sleep had been impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photographs. Someone had been documenting my life for months. The question was why. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Nicholas entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look exhausted," he said. "I wonder why." To my surprise, he nodded. "Fair point." He handed me a cup and took a seat across from me. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows behind him. For the first time since we met, he looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. Like someone carrying a weight that had become part of him. "Did your team find anything?" I asked. Nicholas remained silent for several seconds. "We found a name." My pulse quickened. "And?" "The name creates more questions than answers." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of records, photographs, and notes. One page immediately caught my attention. My eyes widened. "This cannot be right." Nicholas leaned back slightly. "We thought the same thing." The document contained information about my father. The problem was that my father had died when I was 12 years old. At least that was what I had always been told. "Why is his name connected to this?" I whispered. Nicholas studied my reaction carefully. "You tell me." I shook my head. I barely remember him. That was true. My memories consisted of fragments. A baseball game. A fishing trip. A laugh. Nothing more. Nicholas folded his hands together. "Before he died, your father worked for a company connected to a charitable foundation. So, that foundation no longer exists." Something in his voice made me nervous. "What happened to it?" "It disappeared." I frowned. Companies close all the time. Not like this one. He slid another page toward me. The foundation vanished the same year my father died. I stared at him. Your father? Nicholas nodded. The same year, everything changed for my family. Silence filled the room. Neither of us seemed to know what to do with the information. For the first time, our stories appeared connected. Not by coincidence. By something much older. Something hidden. Outside, wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, the library suddenly felt smaller. More confined. You think someone has been trying to bring us together? I said quietly. Nicholas looked toward the window. I think someone has been arranging pieces on a board for a very long time. The answer should have frightened me. Instead, it awakened something else. Curiosity. Determination. A need to understand. Nicholas stood and walked toward the fireplace. Most people would leave after learning all this. I watched him carefully. Would you? A faint smile appeared. No, I smiled too. For the first time since arriving at the estate, the fear felt smaller. The mystery remained. The danger remained. But so did something unexpected. Trust. And neither of us realized it yet. But that trust was about to uncover a secret that had been buried for more than 20 years. The secret waited for us in a place neither of us expected. 3 days after discovering the connection between our fathers, Nicholas's research team uncovered a storage facility on the outskirts of the city. The lease records were decades old. Most of the documents had been forgotten, misplaced, or intentionally ignored. Yet one number kept appearing throughout the files connected to the vanished foundation. The storage unit. On a gray morning filled with cold rain, Nicholas and I stood inside a narrow hallway lined with metal doors. The air smelled faintly of dust and age. A facility manager unlocked the unit and stepped away. Nobody has accessed this space in over 20 years, he explained. Then he left us alone. Nicholas slowly pulled the metal door upward. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Inside sat dozens of sealed boxes covered in dust. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A wooden desk occupied the center of the room. It looked as though someone had simply walked away and never returned. This is impossible, I whispered. Nicholas nodded. That is becoming a theme. We spend hours opening boxes and sorting through records. Most contained ordinary financial documents. Tax reports, donation receipts, meeting notes. Nothing that explained why someone had been watching me for months. Then I found a small leather notebook hidden beneath a stack of folders. The cover was worn from age. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The first page contained a list of names. One of them belonged to my father. Another belonged to Nicholas's father. I looked up immediately. Nicholas. He crossed the room and took the notebook. As he turned the pages, his expression grew more serious. These are project records. Project records for what? He stopped on a page near the center. For a scholarship program. I blinked. That is it. Not exactly. He handed me the notebook. A photograph had been tucked between 2 pages. The image showed several adults standing together at a fundraising event. I recognized my father instantly. Then my eyes widened. Beside him stood a much younger version of Nicholas's father. They were smiling. Friends. Partners. Working together. They knew each other. I whispered. Nicholas stared at the photograph. Better than that. He pointed toward a handwritten note beneath the image. They founded the program together. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Every assumption we had made suddenly shifted. This was not a story about strangers connected by coincidence. Our families had known each other long before either of us was born. As we continued searching, another discovery emerged. Near the back of the notebook rested a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. Not Olivia Carter the adult. Olivia Carter the child. My breath caught instantly. Nicholas looked as stunned as I felt. Open it, he said quietly. Inside rested a handwritten letter. The paper had yellowed with age. I recognized the signature immediately. My father. Tears blurred my vision as I began reading. The letter spoke about responsibility, trust, and a promise made between 2 families. It mentioned a future meeting, a future connection. It even referenced someone named Nicholas. My hands shook. He wrote this before he died. Nicholas remained silent. Then he noticed something at the bottom of the page. A final sentence written separately from the rest. His eyes narrowed. Olivia. What? He pointed toward the handwriting. Your father did not write that last line. A chill ran through me. Because he was right. The handwriting was completely different. And the message changed everything. It read, when the time comes, She will find what the rest of us failed to see. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The storage unit felt colder than before. The rain tapped softly against the metal roof while I stared at the final sentence written beneath my father's letter. When the time comes, she will find what the rest of us failed to see. Those words echoed through my mind again and again. Nicholas carefully took the page and compared the handwriting to several documents we had already found. His expression gradually changed. "I know this handwriting," he said quietly. My heart immediately raced. "Who wrote it?" Nicholas looked down at the notebook. "My father." The answer stunned me. I sat back in the chair, trying to process what that meant. Years before either of us understood what was happening, our fathers had been connected by more than a charitable foundation. They had been planning something together, something important enough to leave messages for the future. We spent the rest of the afternoon examining every document inside the storage unit. As the pieces slowly came together, a clearer picture emerged. The foundation had never been about money. It had been about information. Several influential people had quietly worked together to expose financial misconduct connected to powerful organizations. They gathered evidence. They protected records. They created safeguards in case the truth ever needed to be revealed. My father and Nicholas's father had been among the people leading that effort. They knew they were running out of time, Nicholas said as he reviewed another file. That is why they hid everything. I looked around the room, and somehow they expected us to find it. Not us. He pointed toward the final sentence. You. The realization made me uncomfortable. My entire life I had considered myself ordinary. A waitress. A daughter. Someone who worked hard and stayed out of trouble. Yet every discovery seemed to point back to me. Back to a role I never knew existed. As evening approached, we found the final box. Unlike the others, it contained only one item. A sealed portfolio labeled Legacy Archive. Nicholas carefully opened it. Inside rested copies of documents, signed statements, and detailed records connecting every piece of the mystery. The missing years. The hidden foundation. The reason someone had been watching me. They were not watching me because I was a target. They were watching me because I was the final link. The person unknowingly connected to information everyone else believed had disappeared forever. Relief washed over me so suddenly that I almost laughed. For weeks I had feared that someone wanted something from me. The truth was stranger. They wanted what my family had protected. Nicholas closed the portfolio and released a long breath. "It is over." I looked at him. "Is it?" He smiled faintly. "The mystery is." Outside, the rain finally stopped. Golden evening light filtered through the storage unit doorway. For the first time since entering this strange world, I felt something other than fear or confusion. I felt clarity. Nicholas gathered the documents and prepared to leave. Before stepping outside, he paused beside me. "Do you realize something?" "What?" His expression softened. "You did exactly what they believed you would do." I thought about the restaurant, the object beneath the table, the photographs, the letter, every impossible coincidence that had led us here. Then I smiled. I noticed what everyone else missed. Nicholas nodded. And because of that, two families finally learned the truth. As we walked into the fading sunlight together, neither of us realized that the greatest discovery had nothing to do with hidden records or forgotten secrets. It was the trust we had built along the way, and the life that was waiting for both of us beyond the mystery. 1 year later, I stood in the exact same restaurant where everything had begun. The chandeliers still sparkled above polished marble floors. The city skyline still stretched beyond the windows. Guests still filled the dining room with conversation and laughter. To everyone else, it looked unchanged. To me, it felt like an entirely different place. Sometimes a single moment changes the direction of a life so completely that returning to where it started feels like visiting another world. I was no longer carrying trays through crowded aisles. A great deal had changed over the past year. The foundation our fathers helped create had been rebuilt. Scholarships were once again being awarded to students who needed opportunities. Programs that had disappeared decades earlier were helping families throughout the city. What had started as a mystery ended as something neither Nicholas nor I expected. A second chance. Not only for the foundation. For us. "You are thinking too much again." I smiled before even turning around. Nicholas stood beside one of the windows overlooking the city. He wore the same calm confidence I remembered from the night we met. Yet there was something different now. The distance that once surrounded him had disappeared. He no longer looked like a man carrying the world alone. Maybe, I admitted. I was remembering. Nicholas nodded. So was I. For a moment, we stood together watching the lights below. The city moved endlessly beyond the glass. Cars, buildings, people chasing ordinary dreams. Life continuing exactly as it should. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not looked under that table? He asked quietly. I laughed. Every now and then. And I thought about the question carefully. I think I would still be serving coffee. Nicholas smiled. Probably. And you? His gaze shifted toward the skyline. I think I would still be searching for answers. The honesty in his voice touched me. Because we both knew the truth. Neither of us had found what we were looking for that night. We had found something much greater. Understanding. Family. Purpose. Trust. The things people spend entire lifetimes chasing. A server approached carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water before quietly stepping away. The gesture made me smile. Not long ago, I had been the one serving tables. Life has a strange sense of humor. Nicholas raised his glass slightly. To your father. Emotion tightened my throat. I raised mine. To yours. The glasses touched softly. No grand celebration. No dramatic speech. Just gratitude. Sometimes that is enough. As the evening continued, guests began arriving for the annual scholarship gala. Students filled the room alongside teachers, families, and community leaders. Laughter echoed across the ballroom. Hope filled the air. I watched a young girl accept a scholarship certificate and immediately throw her arms around her mother. The sight brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Nicholas noticed. You are crying. I am not. You absolutely are. I laughed despite myself. Maybe a little. He handed me a handkerchief with exaggerated seriousness. For the record, I am pretending not to notice. The warmth in that moment felt simple. Real. The kind of happiness that does not demand attention because it quietly speaks for itself. Later that evening, as the final guests prepared to leave, I stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city. Cool night air brushed against my face. A few seconds later, Nicholas joined me. Neither of us spoke immediately. We did not need to. Some silences feel empty. Others feel complete. Finally, I looked toward the skyline and smiled. Do you know what I think our fathers were really trying to protect? Nicholas considered the question. What? I watched the lights stretching endlessly into the distance. The belief that good people can still change the future. For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded. I think they would be proud. Standing there beside him beneath the Chicago skyline, I realized the mystery had never been about hidden documents, forgotten secrets, or long-buried records. It was about people, about kindness, about choosing to notice what others overlook. And sometimes, if you are lucky, one small act of courage becomes the beginning of an entirely new life.